Hello, good afternoon, good evening, and wherever you are in this beautiful world and listening and watching Growing Professionals. That is Push Through, Use Because. And so today's episode is really about, we're all on a mission to discover the most cutting edge L&D techniques for people out there listening, learning and development. So L&D is a sort of short acronym for, we want to know how companies like yours are dealing with remote learning and remote training, and what you see are the most pressing topics for 2021. I have a guest here today called Joe Houghton. Thank you very much for connecting with me. And we spoke to each other at a seminar, online seminar workshop, was it last week or the week before? So thank you for connecting back with me. So I really appreciate that.
No problem. Good to be here. Thank you. Yeah.
So a little bit of blurb about Joe. Joe's an assistant professor, so he's really good. The program director at the UCD Smurfit Graduate School for Business. So he's got a really good academic background here, and he's also has the head of learning development with the London-based project consultancy, which is the Project Foundry. So lots and lots of good areas of teaching, learning, and I really feel a high academic area here. So I'm actually honoured to be speaking with you, Joe. And could you give me a little bit of a blurb behind who you are and how you got into what you're doing?
Yeah, it's interesting that you kind of focus in on the kind of academic-y thing and the professor thing. But I mean, I consider myself a businessman who teaches. So I'm not an academic. I mean, I've published a paper or two, but I mean, I think of academics as people who are focused primarily on kind of academic research, whereas that's not my focus. My focus is very much on people development. I was interviewed a few years back by a guy called Paul Fagan, who runs a coaching business in Dublin, Action Coach. And he asked me one day, he said, Joe, you've got 2 words to describe yourself. Okay, what would they be? And I had a little think, and I came up with people gardener. And I think that's my approach, and it fits in very well with this whole idea of learning and development. So whether it's college, whether it's management consultancy and coaching, whether it's teaching camera clubs to be better photographers, all of which are hats that I wear. It's very much about developing people, helping them to skill up and do better at what they want to do. And that's my prime focus.
And I think that's a good way of summarizing that, because we are people at the end of the day. We all want to make sure that whoever we teach, and I'm a trainer as well, that they get success and they build on their success after they leave you. So what do you think are the key traits to sort of L&D professionals to sort of that, at that level where you've encouraged them to learn, but you've also encouraged them to grow? So what do you think are the key traits that you can see?
I think, and I mean, I'm increasingly, networking to link in with other good L&D professionals, because I think if you build your own network of like-minded people, you learn from each other. And I think one of the biggest things that I see in the really good coaches and the really good trainers is they listen. It kind of almost seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Because, you think maybe a coach and a trainer has got to kind of deliver and be the sage on stage. But actually, it's quite the opposite. The really good trainers and the really good coaches do a lot of listening, and they do a lot of focusing around what is it that my audience needs from me? Not what have I got to bring to my audience. That's the wrong way around. So I always try and focus on hearing both the what's said, but what's not said from, whether it's a class of students at university, or whether it's a management team looking for, project management or risk training or whatever, or whether it's a camera club wanting to learn about long exposure photography. It's kind of, I try and put myself in their shoes And if I was sitting on the other end of the Zoom call, or at the other end of the table in the training room, what would I want to take from this session? What would be the nuggets that would help empower me, if you like, as someone who is here to learn?
I like that. And I always talk about listening skills is one of the biggest skills that anyone can have, especially when you're a facilitator.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, wasn't it Warren Buffett who said that the best investment that he ever made was going on that communications course and learning proper communication and proper listening. And I think that's so telling,
I was going to say one of my when I first got into sales 25 years ago, and I was in London, my sales manager said, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Now use it.
Yeah, and it's so true, isn't it? It's so true. So very often, when I'm doing learning sessions, development sessions, or whatever, the first part of the session will be me shutting up and just asking people, okay, what are you bringing to the session? Yeah, what pain points are you bringing to the session? What challenges? What opportunities? What hopes are you coming today with? And we might take an hour of a 3-hour session sometimes doing that, but that's an hour really well spent, because it actually situates everybody, and then it allows you to tailor, if you like, the material that you've brought to what the audience really need. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about, isn't it? It's not about just running a slide deck, and I've run my 30 slides, job done, off we go. It's about connecting perhaps some experience that I've got with things that they want to hear and need to hear, and weaving those together.
Yeah, I always find the best way to connect with people, and there's been proven by a lot of neuroscience now, stories are the biggest way to connect with people and resonate with them, because we all think in visuals anyway, and we all think in sort of pictures, visuals, or movies, or whatever you want to call it. So if you can create a really good story or metaphor, that's the best way to engage with people, or one of the best ways to engage.
Absolutely. Totally agree. I mean, in my college teaching, I'm known as a storyteller. I'm known as somebody who brings the stories from my commercial career kind of into the classroom. So when we were talking earlier this morning, I was doing a session on stakeholder management, and I was talking about times when I was running projects or involved in projects, and there was a stakeholder issue. There was a really supportive stakeholder, or there was somebody that was negative, and how did we kind of deal with these situations? So important. The story, the hero's journey. I recently did a diploma in kind of professional and creative learning with the Innovation Academy at UCD, and they introduced us to this thing called the hero's journey. Which is an incredible cycle, but and whether it's the Hobbit or whether it's Luke Skywalker or whatever you like, that this cycle is the fundamental basis of storytelling, and it's an incredibly powerful cycle to be aware of as any kind of an educator. Yeah,
there's while I was doing that, I went to a story mastery course a few years ago, and it really helped me and prepared to me, because the next week I was pushed out to California to present to 200 VCs. Yeah. And what I had to do is refine my story, my pitch. And it really helped me stand up and really stood. And it was that hero story and who are the characters and where the setting was. So people can get a really rich imagination about where you're going to go. But it's really good for education. It's phenomenal for education.
Absolutely. I mean, so often my students come to me and say, I've got an interview with Ernst & Young next week, and I've got to pitch to them and kind of make a difference and whatever. And I always say to them, go in and tell a story. I say, the first thing you've got to do is find a hook. Okay, so you've got to find some way of engaging the audience with you on an emotional level. They've got to care about you.
Yeah.
Once you can make them care about you, Then you can go in and tell them how wonderful you are and what your GPA was, and that you passed your leaving cert with 700 points or whatever it was. But if they don't care about you, they won't hear all that stuff.
Yeah.
So you've got to make yourself real, and you've got to show that you've done something that mattered, or you volunteer, or something like that, and then go on to the facts-based of it. It's like Simon Sinek's golden circle, isn't it? The start with the why, get people involved with you, and then move on to the what and the how.
It's the big thing called trust, credibility, and likability. The more people that they like of you, and I've been in sales and marketing for the last 25 years, so it's really that connection. And if you can build that connection, then all the better for that, and the metaphor and the story that you can tell. So, look, I know you've been into this area for a number of years. Over the last 12 months, how have you seen the world change from what you can see in your eyes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, everybody's gone online.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very, unless you're kind of working frontline health, I think most people have been forced online, haven't they? And I mean, kudos to all the healthcare workers. I mean, just total respect to everybody who has had to go in and mask up and gown up during this period. We've had it so easy. Talk about first world problems, getting to grips with Zoom and remote teaching and stuff like that. I constantly have to remind myself that however difficult this transition has been for us, it's nothing like what the guys at the front line have faced. Now, that said, it's been a transition, and it's been a transition for a lot of educators who were used to face-to-face interaction and have suddenly had to embrace a 2-inch screen and a camera pointing at you, which is a scary beast if you're not used to this stuff. Yeah. I've been using remote methods to coach for 15 years. When the kids were growing up, and they're like 9 and 8 now, my 2 little ones, we spent 6 months of the year in South Africa while they were 0 to 5. So every summer we'd go for 3 or 4 months, and we'd spend about half the year down there looking after Penny's mum, who was sick and eventually died. But I worked from South Africa, and I did my coaching and I did my classes and things from South Africa, at the time via Skype, because Zoom wasn't the thing then. But it's been around for a long time, so the skill sets have been there. I just don't think they've gone mass market as fast. I mean, a really interesting example of this, I suppose, was I've been into amateur photography for 50 years now, something like that. And a couple of times, 2 or 3 times a month, I would get invited to go over to one of the camera clubs, and you'd hop off in the car at 6:30 in the evening, and you'd rock up to some village hall at 7:30, and you'd talk about photography for an hour or two, and then you'd go home. So when the kids came home a year ago, obviously all the camera clubs were out of business because all the village halls were closed, nobody could connect and all the rest of it. So I wrote to every camera club in Ireland on the Friday. They came home, the kids came home on the Thursday night, if you remember, just before Paddy's weekend. And I wrote to every camera club and I said, you may not have realized yet, but we've stopped. And we're not going to be back in the village hall for a long time. But there's this amazing thing called Zoom. And this was before people knew about Zoom. And what we've seen and I mean, I'm just talking camera clubs. What we've seen in the last 12 months is that camera clubs have totally pivoted.
Yeah.
Now, this is an audience of primarily 40 to 80-year-olds. Okay. So the kind of, not the classic demographic for embracing technology, you might think. Every single camera club in Ireland and the UK and pretty much around the world flipped into Zoom within 3 or 4 weeks, and have now run every week and been able to get speakers from all over the world. And I've talked to clubs in the UK, in New Zealand, in South Africa, all from the comfort of my kitchen table of an evening. So I think the last year has been a challenge, but it's also been a huge opportunity. And I think there's been a huge number of different communities that have moved online and seen that there's huge possibilities and huge potential benefits to learning and exchanging information. And for the camera clubs as well, I mean, it's provided that sense of continuity for those communities, because very often the camera club was the only time some people got out and met other people in the week. So, you know, being able to connect with the 20 or 30 or 50 other people in the club via Zoom has really helped a lot of people's mental health, as well as, you know, enabling them to continue with their hobby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big key point now is now people are at home and we're still in strict lockdown. I'm not sure when that's going to change, but it is the mental health, the well-being and getting out and exercising and all that. So what do you think the main sort of topics over the next 12 months? How do you think it's going to change with these enabling these skills, but delivering it as a blended approach? Because we have fast forwarded 5 years or maybe more than that to now. Like we're in the present. Like this shouldn't have happened, but we are where we are, and in some respects it's been good, and in other respects it's been obviously not so good. But what do you think the next 12 months will be, and how do you perceive that happening?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the different pulls are from the kind of the camp that wants us to return to how it used to be, which is in-person teaching and in-person training and that, and the camp that actually doesn't want to go back there, that kind of recognizes that you know, Zoom or WebEx or whatever can give, if not the same experience, a comparable learning experience with some pluses and some minuses. So I think we're moving to a hybrid model. I think what we're going to find is that learning and development is offered in both online and co-located spaces from now on, but it won't be, one won't be the default and the other won't be the default. It'll be kind of, you can choose which one you want to embrace. Now that requires us as educators to embrace skill sets around presenting to camera, around structuring work in a slightly different way online. Because, I mean, for instance, I shorten my classes because I don't do any classes that are longer than 2 hours in length. Not now. I have a break every 45 minutes. To allow people to, and I've been reading even more recently that maybe we should take a micro break at like 20 minutes and do the 20-20-20. You know,
is it Pomodoro effect? Is that the correct?
I don't know whether 20-20-20 is Pomodoro or whether that's more the chunking of time, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
But this kind of break for after 20 minutes, and you know, look at something 20 yards away and something 20 inches away to give your eye strain a break and stuff. Little things like that make a huge difference in this online space now. So I think we're moving to a hybrid situation. But I mean, for instance, colleges face almost an existential threat at the moment because now, you know, they've got their buildings and they want the students to go back to campus to justify the cost of, you know, running these massive edifices and all the rest. But yet there's now a big pull from a lot of college students to say, well, why can't I sign up for this course remotely and not have to come to college? And it's funny because my full-time students, you know, they feel they've lost out because they've gone to Zoom. And they wanted to be in college and they wanted that interaction. A lot of the part-time students who are, you know, working full-time and then do an evening class and typically would have had to come to college to do that evening class, they're saying Zoom's great. Yeah, we love Zoom. We don't mind not being in college. Yeah, it's actually great that I can finish work, and then I can jump onto my college call, and when I've finished, I don't have to drive anywhere, and I'm done for the evening and stuff like that. So there's definite pulls from different directions in terms of what learners want from us as educators, and I think we're going to have to adjust to that. And that's going to be one of the interesting things, how the institutions adjust their offer I think, and how we offer what we've offered in the past.
I think that's an interesting topic for discussion, actually, because I like both of them. I like to be present, and you do still get that we are social creatures. We are, like, as humans, we are very sociable. So, but this last 12 months has turned us to pivot and try and think of different ways to be sociable. But it still doesn't beat being in person. I know that for a fact. But it can be a challenging way of doing it. But I think the blended approach is the way is where we are all heading, and the e-learning. The question I was going to ask, actually, while I'm thinking of it, is we do this online training and education, but where's the habit forming afterwards? Because we know there's 24 hours. If you don't use it, you lose it. So what happens after that? How do you deal with that?
It's interesting. I got a gig with a big charity recently, and I've been working with this charity for about a year or so on various things, and they wanted some project management training. Okay. So they approached me and they said, "Joe, you're a project management professor. Can you give us some training?" And the ask was for 3 or 4 sessions, okay, of, if you like, PowerPoint slides.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, obviously I can come and do that, but I don't want to come and do that. What I want to do is I want to facilitate some workshops with your teams where we introduce you to the concepts of project management in the context of the program of work that you've set yourself for the year. Okay. And that's what we did. So we I might spend 15 minutes and introduce scoping. Yeah. For instance, okay. How do you scope a project? Well, here's the things you need. You need what's in and what's out, and what can you achieve and what can't you achieve, and what are in your competencies and what aren't, and that kind of stuff. And then send all the teams off to breakout rooms for half an hour to come up with a scoping statement, and then come back and decompose those statements and see where they worked and where they didn't, and stuff like that. And then the next session, the following week, they've gone back to work, but they've applied the stuff to work. And then we have a debrief session the next week for the first half hour, maybe, or whatever. And then we introduce another concept and we throw them into breakout rooms. So rather than it just being sage on stage, me pushing slides at them, I introduce a concept, they go and play with it in a facilitated environment for a couple of hours with me to kind of push them and prod them and say, yeah, this is okay, but could you have done better here? Or what about this and stuff? And the reaction to that has been incredibly positive. And they've come back and they've said, this is so much better than training. Yeah, it's kind of, but it is training. It's just better training, isn't it? Because you're connecting them with what they need to know in a real environment where they're working on their own stuff, rather than just pushing stuff at them and hoping some of it'll stick.
Yeah. Well, it's the engagement that people like, and that's sometimes the best way for people to learn. I learn with humour. I throw a lot of humour. I'm sure you're the same. So tell me this: how do you create? I think you might have discussed it. How do you create an atmosphere for learning? How do you sort of format that?
Whenever I have a new cohort, whether it's a new class, whether it's a new company that I'm doing some coaching or management training or whatever with, I kind of always open up, as we said earlier on, with the listening bit. Okay. Yeah. I want to hear from you. Introduce yourselves. Tell me about yourselves. Tell me about what challenges you're bringing to this environment. The other thing that I always say, and it's very important to actually verbalize this, okay, is that this environment that we're in is a safe space to try stuff and to fail. Okay, so I'm going to put new concepts in front of you. I'm going to ask you to look at stuff. I'm going to ask you to, run with an idea or whatever. And if I send you off to a breakout room or we have a class discussion or whatever, it's okay if you don't get it, or it's okay if you try it and it takes a few times to actually figure it out. Mm-hmm. So I think making learning and development a safe space is really, really important, because a lot of people come to training sessions and they maybe feel they've been pushed into it, and they feel they've got to pass and stuff like that. Whereas I think that if you can make it a safe space, it's a psychologically safe space then that they can engage in, and they can let their barriers down a bit, and they can really throw themselves into it and not be worried that they might get it wrong, because there is no wrong. They're learning, you know.
There's a saying, "Fail forward,"
Yes.
and there's no such thing as failure, only feedback.
Yes.
And then the Marshall Goldsmith is feed forward. So you feed forward from what you have learnt, but then you adapt it for the next time. But
That's
you
right.
learn what you did and you move it forward. So that's a really good way. So how do you personally learn? What do you do to learn and grow, but stay relevant and up to speed?
I've started joining a lot more of the kind of webcasts and stuff to network with other learning and development professionals. As I said, I put myself through that Innovation Academy diploma in creative learning and stuff. But I mean, like in the last year, I reached out to a colleague at UCD, Linda Yang, and she created this incredible community of educators at UCD, and we created this thing called the College of Business Intercultural Forum. Now, I said to Linda, "This is fantastic. We should write this up." Now, this is from somebody who is a businessman who teaches, not a researcher. Yeah. She said, "Brilliant idea," and she found this journal, and we wrote a paper, and that was my first ever peer-reviewed publication. So, if you like, I'm embracing the idea of these different types of education and learning, and trying to jump into things I've not done before, but collaborating with people who have done it before.
Yeah,
if you like. So I'm hopefully bringing something to the party, but I'm reaching out to people like yourself and like Linda and, you know, like Alan at the Innovation Academy, who are experts. So I'm learning, they're getting hopefully something, and it's win-win-win.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. And I think within this, it's like being a doctor. You have to keep relevant. You have to keep up to speed, because there's so many new developments and so many different processes that you have to sort of can't learn everything. But as long as you niche it down to your area of expertise, and then you give the gift back to your students.
Yeah. And you can't just teach. You've got to teach, but you've also got to do as well. And that's why I do the management consulting and the gigs with charities and with companies, because then I'm actually practicing my skills and keeping them current in the, if you like, the real world, rather than in that slightly rarefied atmosphere that you could just end up in of being in college. Yeah.
Practice what you preach.
Indeed.
Look, I really appreciate today. So, Joe, could you tell us how people can find out more about what you do?
My website for my consulting stuff is Houghton.consulting, and I think that's down at the bottom of the screen now. Yeah, I can see that floating by. You can email me anytime. It's joe.houghton@gmail.com. And only too willing to have a chat with anybody anytime about any kind of L&D or learning environment. Yeah, super.
Awesome. So really appreciate that today. You've been listening to Growing Professionals by Use Because. And Use Because is really deeper learning from some of the greatest minds that have ever been put pen to paper in some of the most wonderful books out there that you can learn and you can grow. So it's usebecause.com. This will be pushed out over the next coming weeks with some wonderful people like yourself that can actually give some really good, great golden nuggets so we can all learn and we can all grow. So again, Joe, really appreciate the discussion today, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been good to be here.
Hey, before you go, just a quick message about usebecause.com and what we're all about. We believe that true learning happens when you understand, remember, and deliberately practice your newly acquired knowledge. So with that in mind, you can get access to our purpose-built learning tools to help you do just that. So try all our tools for all of our episodes, free for a month. You can cancel anytime. For all of this and all of the podcast episodes, head over to usebecause.com. Until next time.